Let's move to the second Milesian philosopher for that we will like to look at, and his name is Anaximander of Miletus. In his account of Anaximander, Aristotle preserves a genuine and important objection to Thales. This is probably the first recorded criticism of one philosopher by another in the West. Thales had conceived the primordial element as unbounded and water. We have discussed this one thoroughly in the previous recording. But Aristotle remarks, and it's worth reading in whole. There are some, that is Anaximander, who make these the unbounded, simply the unbounded, and not air or water, in order that the other things may not be destroyed by their unboundedness. They are in opposition to one another. Air is cold, water is moist, and fire hot. And therefore, and it's worth considering what he's saying, if any one of them were unbounded, the rest would have ceased to be by this time. Accordingly, they say that what is unbounded is something other than the elements, and from it the elements arise. Aristotle is saying, if there is one primary ingredient, then this primary ingredient cannot have its opposite. In this case, water cannot have fire. So that if Thales was correct, that water was the primary ingredient for everything, the question of Anaximander is, why is there fire? If water is unbounded, how was it possible that we have fire? Anaximander's objection evidently was that the hot, the cold, the wet, and the dry, and the things which embody them, stand to each other in a relation of opposition. Therefore, if one of them were made primary ingredient, stoicheion, and unbounded, the others could not continue to exist. So far as we can now tell, Thales could have had no answer to this objection. Anaximander supposed the answer to lie in reading the primary principle of its association with any single sensible opposite and simply making it the unbounded. And for the first time, we hear the word arche. Let's read this one from Patricia Curd's Pre-Socratic Reader. Of those who declared that the arche, the primary stuff, is one, moving, and aperon, peiron, boundary, aperon, without boundary, and boundless. Anaximander said that the aperon was the arche, an element of things that are. And he was the first to introduce this name for the arche. That is, he was the first to call the arche, no, architecture, foundation, archdiocese, no, aperon. In addition, he said that the motion is eternal, in which it occurs that the heavens come to be. He says that the arche is neither water nor any of the other things called elements, but some other nature which is aperon, unboundless, out of which come to be all the heavens and the worlds in them. The things that are perish into the things from which they come to be, according to necessity. And we'll continue the next one because the succeeding lines will come back to us as important later on. These, as you know by now, by reading the primordial principle of its association with any single sensible opposite and simply making it as unbounded, is a great leap of the creative imagination and constitutes an abstraction, drawing away from, of a very high order. Anaximander, posited as explanatory of the world of sense experience, to explain the world, he drew from a principle that had no characteristic at all found in the world of sense experience. The aperon cannot come from anything that is sensible. We read further. He says that the arche is neither water nor any of the other things called elements, but some nature which is aperon. So it's material, but its materiality is characterized by its unboundedness, no? Aperon, no? We have an English word, pericardium, which is the muscle that envelopes, wraps around, perimeter, wraps around the heart. Aperon is without perimeter. This is eternal, he says, and ageless, and surrounds all the worlds. In addition, he said that the motion is eternal, in which it occurs that the heavens come to be. It's very interesting how Anaximander understands this one, no? For him, the unbounded could not merely have been unbounded in extent, for water was unbounded in that sense. But for him, it's not extent that makes the unbounded unbounded. It must have been unbounded in that it was internally undifferentiated. And for that sense, he is a development of the thought of Thales. Unbounded in the sense that it was internally undifferentiated. This was, in fact, Aristotle's view, who supposed Anaximander's boundless to be, or aperon, to be a mixture of all existing opposites. The opposites fuse in it, as water and wine fused in watered wine. For the Roman Catholics, when water is added to wine in the offertory, that's the same unity and boundlessness. And it is unboundless because it is itself of no determinate sort, a thing which is no kind because it is all kinds. Let's read this one from Aristotle's Physics. This, the infinite, or the apeiron, does not have an arche, but this seems to be the arche of the rest, the source of everything else. And to contain all things and steer all things, as all declare who do not fashion other causes aside from the infinite, the apeiron. And this is the divine, for it is deathless and indestructible, as Anaximander and most of the natural philosophers say. It's worth noting at this point that early Greek thinkers always understood matter to be infinite. They never have any concept of creation, for that is a Judeo-Christian contribution. But that these boundless is present in everything. The elements of the world, and I bring back a quote which we've already looked at a while ago. The elements of the world, then, its opposites, undergo a separating off in the perpetual motion of the apeiron, like a ringing towel, a towel that you wet and move around until the water seems to splatter. No? That's the same movement that is being described here. The elements of the world, then its opposites, separate out or separate off from the primitive mixture, the apeiron. And once separated, though, they find themselves in a perpetual state of war. War. The one remaining fragment of Anaximander, and probably the oldest remaining fragment of philosophy, bears directly to this point, and I'd like to refer to you to the last section of these quote. The things that are perish into the things which they come to be according to necessity, for they pay penalty and retribution to each other for their injustice in accordance with the ordering of time. That's the oldest fragment that we have. In another rendition, we can read, the source of coming to be for existent things is that into which destruction too happens according to necessity. And that's very important, as you can read also in this fragment. According to necessity, for they pay penalty and retribution to each other for their injustice according to the ordering of time. The warring opposites, then, commit perpetual injustice upon each other. And the concrete case that Anaximander probably had in mind is the perpetual war in season between winter, the moist and the cold, and summer, the hot and dry. The cycle of the seasons, and perhaps the smaller cycle of day and night, prompt this view as they prompt the predominance in primitive thought of these particular opposites rather than others. Anaximander's view is that one opposite encroaches on the domain of the other, like a yin and yang in Chinese philosophy, a case of injustice, and a reaction takes place through the infliction of punishment by the restoration of equality, of more than equality, since the wrongdoer is deprived of part of his original substance too. This is given to the victim in addition to what was his own, and in turn leads, it might be inferred, to chorus, surfeit on the part of the former victim who now commits injustice on the former aggressor. The cycle of recurring injustice is held in balance by the assessment or ordering of time. Time, therefore, functions as the judge. The world, then, is like a pendulum maintaining its balance or equilibrium through the alternation of its extremes. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe the YouTube channel Samo't sa Salita. This lecture is from Greek Philosophy, Thales to Anaximander, edited by Reginald Allen, and a pre-Socratic reader edited by Patricia Kern. Thank you for your time and listening.